If you have yet to build your first terrarium, or you recently did, the thought of trimming and maintaining it can seem a bit daunting, but it's really quite easy. This terrarium is a bit overgrown, and it's already been trimmed once already, so let me show you some of the tips and tricks I use to maintain and course correct your terrarium so that it looks the way that you want it forever. This section of Photonia up front is not only already rooting, but it is also blocking out some of the light and the visuals of the center focal point crystal, so it needs to go. Believe it or not, this piece is actually large enough to not only be replanted, but since it is already branching out and rooting, it can actually be used in an entirely new build, which is what I did with it. Next, we are going to be trimming back and manicuring some of the thread moss. As I predicted and have experienced in other builds, the thread moss completely overdominates and oversaturates the haircap moss. It grows much faster, so it needs to be trimmed back periodically. Also, with respect to the Photonia we just cut, remember that when you cut it in a place like that right above a node, you're going to get 2 more branches, so it'll actually start to grow back significantly thicker given enough time. Next, I am using the tweezers to tease the moss off of the glass, so that it can be cut and either removed or packed down to thicken the carpet. The moisture and condensation that gets stuck to the glass will cause the moss to grow up it quite quickly. The most important tip for micro-terrarium maintenance is planning during the stage of creation. Although aesthetically pleasing, the stick does make it a little difficult to trim the moss in the back corner, so that's something I have to deal with. Trimming a terrarium also generates debris on the glass, whether it be moss, dirt, or your fingerprint oil, so it is important to keep that maintained whilst going through the process so that you can get a good visual without any obstructions. This is not all the moss that we removed from the terrarium, but it is a good amount of it. This is enough to chop up and use to either seed a new terrarium or fill in gaps in one that doesn't have as lush of a carpet as you wanted and you are impatient like I am. I have come back a few days later at night because the children screaming outside were driving me insane, hence the lighting change and the condensation on the glass. As you see here, the branch that we removed from the one piece of white Photonia, due to its obstruction of light, has started to alter the direction in which the red Photonia and the remainder of that white Photonia grew. We will begin to course correct with trimming and replanting. Additionally, you can manipulate the growth based on the orientation of the light. When trimming a terrarium plant, cut just above a leaf node. This will help it create a branched out bushy effect. When we go to replant that cutting, although different plants are going to have mildly different requirements, essentially we want to push down to the next leaf node. This will give it more surface area for rooting. When we cut the branches the way that we do, that removes the apical meristem from the terminal point of that section. This is what causes the plant to hydra out like that. Additionally, when we take those cuttings and place them behind or around and start filling out sections, that creates depth and density. I could get into the hormone aspect of why removing the plant tip does that, but that's not really fit for a tips and tricks video for beginners. If you would like an in-depth conversation about that, please let me know in the comments and I can get very nerdy very quickly. Lastly, I attempt to manipulate some of the oak leaf creeping fig to get it to start growing how I want. It's not the most cooperative at this size, need to wait for it to get a little bit longer, but we're at least starting the process of getting it to grow in a big circle. When all is said and done, we have a terrarium that is a lot cleaner, neater, and denser than it was prior to starting. You can certainly let them just grow wild. I have some in my windowsill that I like to do that too. However, when we have a certain aesthetic goal in mind, trimming and manicuring it and getting it to that point over the plant's natural growth rather than just starting off with it like that is actually quite a lot of fun. And despite the suppressed rage in my voice while I am recording, it is quite soothing as well.